of the Lord.
Our first reading on this feast of the Santo Niño, the child Jesus, is taken from the prophet Isaiah. We in the Philippines have been blessed with this special permission from the Vatican. We are allowed to celebrate the second Sunday in ordinary time as a recognition of this most ancient or the oldest icon of faith in the Philippines, the Santo Niño, now enshrined in Cebu. And so our reflection for this Sunday revolves around this question: what does it mean to be a child in the kingdom of God? Being a child in the kingdom of God. The prophet Isaiah presents to us as though two types of kingdoms: the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. And of course, light will triumph over darkness. Isaiah says, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light." So, the kingdom of light will overpower, will defeat the kingdom of darkness. How does Isaiah depict or portray the kingdom of darkness? The images he uses are the following: the images of slavery, like taskmasters, pole on their shoulder, the yoke that should be carried by the slaves. So one aspect of darkness is the slavery being imposed on people. Another image is that of war, of battle, bloodshed, where you have weapons that curtail life, violence, destruction everywhere. Darkness depicted in terms of slavery and battle. If you look at those two, we see something common in them. You see the rule of domination, power that dominates over people. Power that is used not to serve, but to kill. Power that serves self-interest, the interest of the taskmasters, the lords. Power that becomes a vehicle of division, of destruction, and not of peace. We can even say that this is power gone crazy, gone mad. It is not power used for the good. That's why it is called the kingdom of darkness. How about the kingdom of light? According to Isaiah, this kingdom will be inaugurated by a child. A child. How can a child rule? And how can a child combat a kingdom that is set up by many powerful persons and forces? How can a child do that? Now, knowing that this is a biblical language, we come to realize that this child is not just a literal baby, but there is something symbolic about this, symbolic in faith. We ask the question, how can being a child promote the kingdom of light depicted here in terms of wisdom, justice, counsel, peace? We know we are in a different realm here. This is not just being a baby, but this is being a child in another realm, in what we call the kingdom of God. But let us bear that in mind if we want to fight against the kingdom of darkness promoted by unwieldy power, pride that turns violent. We need to find a child. We need to become children in order to bear the light to others.
The Word of the Lord.
Our second reading on this feast of the Santo Niño, or the child Jesus, is taken from the letter of Paul to the Ephesians. We have been reflecting on what does it mean to be a child in the kingdom of God. The first reading from Isaiah depicts a child as the bearer of the kingdom of light. But we know right away that this is not childlikeness in a physical, mental way. It is being a child in the kingdom of light. In the second reading, we know who that child is, who the child sent by the Father is, in order to bring light to the world. His name is Jesus. Jesus, the child, the Son of the Father. And from Jesus, the child, we have received spiritual blessings. So St. Paul alerts us to the fact that spiritual blessings in the kingdom of the Father comes to us through the child, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. Being a child, therefore, is to be learned from Jesus. If we ask the question, what does it mean to be a child in God's kingdom, in the kingdom of light? We turn to Jesus. We know that Jesus, as the Son, as a child, manifested this childlike quality in two ways. First, by His openness to the one whom He calls Abba, Father. Part of being a child in Jesus is this complete openness to God, receiving everything from God, not choosing what to receive from God. This is complete docility, what we call obedience. And because of this total openness to the Father, Jesus, the child, also was ready to be sent, was always available to do what the Father wanted Him to do. So, the childlike quality found in Jesus, the Son of God, is first manifested in this openness, obedience, and availability to the Father. The second aspect of the sonship or the childlikeness of Jesus is His being one with us. Being one with the lowly, the weak, being a creature, being dependent on God, but at the same time being one in communion and solidarity with those who suffer, becoming a brother, understanding what everyone experiences or goes through. This is being a child, not being aloof, not pretending to be better than the others, not pretending that ordinary human conditions are beyond my reach. No. Part of the childlikeness of Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, is His embrace of the lowly condition of humanity. Being one with them is part of being a child, as manifested in Jesus. Jesus the child, two aspects. total openness to God, and total communion with lowly human beings. St. Paul reminds the Ephesians that we are called to be children, adoptive children of God in Jesus Christ. In Jesus the child, we can also become children of God. We are already children of God as creatures, as created by God, and for us as baptized. But this is a calling. We need to respond continuously to the call to remain a child like Jesus Christ. And so St. Paul prays for the Ephesians so that they may appreciate and understand this beautiful calling that they have received. My dear brothers and sisters, Jesus is that child, the one who inaugurates the kingdom of light. And we too are asked to belong to that kingdom, be children. We are called to be children like the child Jesus.
The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel passage on this feast of the Santo Niño, or the child Jesus, is taken from Matthew. We have been reflecting on the question, what does it mean to be a child in the kingdom of God? In the first reading from Isaiah, we are presented with the contrast between two kingdoms, the kingdom of darkness, dominated by pride, by violence, and the kingdom of light, which is to be inaugurated by a child. And we know right away that being a child there goes beyond being a baby, an infant. It has deep spiritual meaning and significance. For a child to be the bearer of the kingdom of light, there must be something more than being young in age. So, in the second reading from the letter of Paul to the Ephesians, the figure of the child of God, Jesus, is put at the center. He exercises his being a child in two ways. First, by being totally open and obedient to the Father. And secondly, by being lowly, in solidarity with humble, weak sinners. And by being a child, he is the source, or has become the source, of spiritual blessings to all of us, especially the blessing of being adopted children of God. This is our calling according to St. Paul. It is very rare that we think of our Christian calling in terms of being a child or becoming a child like Jesus, so that like him, we can also promote the kingdom of light. This is affirmed in the Gospel. A question was put to Jesus: who is the greatest in the kingdom of God? Now, let us go back to the first reading. In the kingdom of darkness, in the kingdoms of this world, how do you measure greatness? Isaiah gives us the clear answers. Who is the greatest in the kingdoms of the world? Those who are more powerful, those who can control other people, those who can manipulate people, economies, especially the poor and the vulnerable, those who can exert brute force in order to subjugate other people, those who even become violent for whatever cause they are fighting for. The kingdoms of the world measure their greatness according to conquest, domination, subjugation of other people. We know that. In fact, that's part of our daily experience. Unfortunately, in different aspects of life and on different levels. Sometimes we experience this even among family members. Sadly, this is also the name of the game in business and politics. Unfortunately, this type of greatness, this false sense of greatness, comes as a temptation also within the church. We should be attentive to the allurement of greatness in the kingdom of this world, in the kingdom of darkness. Jesus presents greatness in the kingdom of God. He calls a child and presents the child to his disciples and says, unless you change and become like this child, you will not be part of the kingdom of God. You will not enter the kingdom of God. You have to change. You have to be converted to being a child. So no one can say, oh, I'm only 7 years old, I'm a child. Or someone will say, oh, that's impossible, I'm already 57 years old, I'm already 85 years old, I cannot be a child again. No. We have to change. Or, using the terminology of St. Paul in the second reading, you have to respond to your calling to be a child if you want to enter the kingdom of God. Now, how does one become a child in the kingdom of God? Jesus says, be lowly, be meek, be humble. Jesus is really depicting or describing himself, describing his brand of being a child, lowly before God, obeying God who is greater than he is, being available to do the will of the Father, and lowliness also in his relationship with other human beings, accepting a lowly carpenter as his father and a lowly maiden of Nazareth as his mother, associating with lowly and poor fishermen, mingling with sinners, bringing to them God's mercy. We talked about this childlikeness of Christ in the second reading. So Jesus is telling us, unless you change, unless you change like a child, unless you become lowly, abandoning pride, abandoning domination, which are the banners of the kingdoms of this world, then you have no place in the kingdom of God. So, brothers and sisters, very concretely, being a child like Jesus is in lowliness, humility, meekness before God, and in our relationship with brothers and sisters. But Jesus adds something else. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. And if you receive any of these little ones, you receive me. Wow. It is not enough for me to become more and more like a child. I have to accept and to welcome the lowly, the poor in our midst. They are children. They are dependent on God. They are helpless. They need God's protection. And the Father has a soft spot in his heart for them. Jesus, the child, the lowly one, associates himself with them. Remember, it's in the same Gospel of Matthew where he says, "If you do this to the least of your brothers and sisters, you do it to me." So Jesus invites us to be a child, to be lowly ourselves, and secondly, to embrace God's children present among the poor, the hungry, the thirsty, the prisoners, the naked, the homeless. We receive Him when we welcome these poor children, but blessed children of God.